My boyfriend thought I was a bookworm. When he was drunk, he complained to his friends, "She's just good at studying, and her family doesn't have much money. Believe it or not, if I slap some banknotes on her face, she'll immediately come crawling like a dog." But later, I was sitting on someone's lap, crying. He kissed me from behind my ear to my neck and chuckled. "Well, bookworm. Does he know that you're actually the daughter of the biggest real estate developer in the city?" In the evening, it was our group's turn to do the cleaning duty. I carried a big black plastic bag and came back after taking out the trash. Then I saw my boyfriend getting cozy with my best friend. My boyfriend lifted my best friend's chin playfully. My best friend raised her arm to wrap it around his neck. I clenched my jaw, quietly listening to their conversation. "When are you going to break up with her?" My best friend of 10 years was now playing with my boyfriend's collar, urging him to break up with me. I was just standing outside the window, looking at these two people expressionlessly. I almost forgot exactly when it all started. On the way home from school, it became the three of us, me, my boyfriend Oliver, and my best friend Chloe. I looked down at my extremely long shadow stretched by the setting sun, while the two shadows beside me were almost touching each other. There was an honor roll of monthly exam results at the school entrance. My name was on the top again this time. "Valerie, you're so amazing. You're always on top." My best friend shook my arm, complimenting me with a big smile. Oliver sneered beside her. "What's the use of being good at studies? She's still so tacky." He didn't finish the rest of the sentence because my best friend patted his arm. "How could you say that about her? You know, her family conditions aren't good. She can only rely on studying." That's what she said, but her hand on Oliver's arm didn't let go. She looked at me with understanding eyes. "Valerie, we're going to GNR tonight. You have to study, so you probably can't come, right?" The GNR they mentioned is a gathering place. These rich kids like Oliver, who had already decided to go abroad, had no intention of studying. On Friday nights, they usually went there to have fun. Chloe asked me like that because she was certain that I wouldn't go with them. Moreover, Oliver's small motorcycle could only carry one person. I nodded. Sure enough, Chloe sat on the back seat of Oliver's motorcycle very naturally. I watched them ride away quickly, leaving me behind cleanly. The sun was setting on the edge of the city. I squatted on the ground, playing with my hands out of boredom, until I almost dislocated my little finger. The roar of a motorcycle finally came from the distance. I knew that person was coming to find me on his motorcycle. Such a flamboyant and unrestrained sound only belonged to him. But I didn't want to look up. A car that was 100 times more beautiful than Oliver's motorcycle stopped in front of me. The first thing I saw was his black long boots. He rubbed my head gently but firmly. Then I looked up at him. To be honest, Caesar's eyes were also 100 times more beautiful than Oliver's. The streetlights were flickering. Caesar put his hands in his pockets and looked down at me. "Why are you squatting? Be civilized." I almost picked up my school bag and threw it at him. His voice was deep and nice. Could he please not say such things? I had been squatting for too long, and my knees were a bit numb when I stood up. Anyway, I didn't stand steadily. I just fell into his arms. The zipper on his clothes hit my right cheek, and I hissed, but I didn't really want to stand steadily. So he just held me like that. "We haven't seen each other for so long, and you're throwing yourself into my arms?" His voice tickled my ear when he spoke. I pinched his side gently. It felt like his body was also better to touch than Oliver's. I didn't expect that when Caesar said he would take me to have fun, he would bring me to GNR. This place was a bit troublesome for me. After all, this afternoon, my good boyfriend and best friend had just said they were going to have fun here. I tugged at Caesar's sleeve. "Let's go to another place. It's noisy here." But if he would listen to me, he wouldn't be Caesar. "You can also go back by yourself." The ambient lighting always created an ambiguous illusion. He reached out and pinched my earlobe. "Besides, it's not noisy in the private room." Who said it wasn't noisy in the private room? Those people screaming like crazy almost burst my eardrums. I stood up and prepared to go to the corridor to get some fresh air. Although it was midsummer, the indoor temperature was set too low. When passing by a private room, I wasn't going to stop at first. But my boyfriend's voice was so recognizable. Oliver, why don't you bring out that girlfriend of yours who's super good at studying for us to see? Oh, don't mention it. She doesn't know how to dress up at all. She's focused on her studies. Oliver didn't know what was wrong with him. Maybe he had drunk too much. He started talking excitedly. Damn it, you know what? She's so damn aloof all the time, and she won't even let me touch her. She's just a bit better at studying. Her family doesn't have much money. I'm with her because she's a bit good looking. I don't understand what this kind of girl is pretending for. Believe it or not, if I slap some banknotes on her face, she'll immediately come crawling like a dog. I stood at the door of the private room, raising my eyebrows. It seemed that I had heard every word clearly. Just at this moment, a chuckle came from behind me. Caesar didn't know when he had stood behind me, and he was listening with great interest just like me. Just when I was about to turn around and ask him what he was doing here, he suddenly grabbed me and dragged me into the small cubicle next to it. It seemed to be a storage place, a bit crowded. He put his arm around my waist and then closed the door. There was a section of glass in the middle of the door, and it happened to be able to see the scene outside. Oliver was being supported by his friends and walking towards the corridor. He seemed to be still cursing as he walked. Caesar raised his hand to tidy the hair on my shoulder. He bit my ear and said, "Tell me, if he knew that you're actually the daughter of the biggest real estate developer in the city, would he be very regretful?" My father always taught me not to think that I was superior to others. So in primary school, junior high school, and high school, all the things he provided for me were just right. Neither shabby and undignified nor showing off. However, maybe it was because I didn't spend much money in front of Oliver. He always thought that I was a poor kid who got into school by good grades. The cursing voice in the corridor gradually faded away, and Caesar opened the door and held my hand to walk out. I struggled several times, but my hand was held by him, our fingers intertwined. "Caesar." I called his name. He turned around to look at me, and even grinned wickedly as he held up our joined hands and shook them in front of us. "What? Holding hands with me in front of your little boyfriend? Will you feel guilty? Caesar is my childhood sweetheart." I don't know if it's appropriate to describe him as a childhood sweetheart. Although I've known him since I was a child, not many people know about our relationship. When he was a child, he lived in my house for a while. My father was very polite to him. That kind of politeness wasn't the kindness towards a child. It was the flattery towards a superior. Actually, my father was already a person of some status in the city. There was actually someone who could make him take such careful care. However, Caesar only stayed in my house for less than half a year and then left. I didn't know where he went. The next time I met him was that day. I suddenly received a text message on my phone. An address, our school's gymnasium. The person who sent the text message was Caesar, who hadn't been in contact with me for a long time. So that day I went to the gymnasium, and as a result, I witnessed my boyfriend Oliver kissing my best friend Chloe against the wall. Before that, I thought Oliver just looked down on me. I didn't expect that he would cheat on me. And the person he cheated with was my best friend. Just when I wanted to rush out and argue with them, my hands were suddenly held from behind. The current Caesar is completely different from the naive boy he was when he was young. I always thought that he would grow into a gentle and sunny big boy. But obviously, the current person has nothing to do with the words gentle and sunny. His eyes were dark, his steps were silent, and his face was even more handsome than I imagined, but it somehow made my spine tingle. He raised his eyebrows, and I flinched suddenly. He spoke in my ear. "I heard he's your boyfriend? He's already cheating on you. What a scumbag. What do you think?" That was the reunion between Caesar and me after 5 years. When my boyfriend Oliver and my best friend Chloe were kissing passionately, Caesar looked up and straightened the bow tie on my school uniform in front of me, smiling. "Do you want to get revenge by cheating on him too?" Today is my 18th birthday. But this 18th birthday of mine hasn't been going well. I witnessed my boyfriend and my best friend being affectionate with each other again this afternoon. In the evening, I called my dad, and he told me that his flight was delayed and he couldn't make it back to celebrate my birthday. Since you're already 18, right? Adults shouldn't do something as childish as celebrating their own birthdays. Although his voice on the other end of the phone was full of tiredness, I still wanted to talk back to him. If you don't come back, I'll smoke, drink, perm my hair, and get tattoos. There were two chuckles on the other end of the phone. Do whatever you want. Then he hung up. I stared fiercely at the phone with its screen already off. The sound of a lighter opening and closing came. Caesar had a cigarette in his mouth and was looking at me blatantly. Suddenly, I had an overwhelming urge to do all kinds of rebellious things, so I waved to him. Caesar, teach me how to smoke. Come to think of it, I hated Oliver smoking, but I thought the man in front of me looked strikingly handsome even with a cigarette in his mouth. He slowly took out a cigarette box from his pocket and then took out a cigarette and handed it to me. Put it in your mouth. I opened my mouth and put the cigarette in it. The lights flickered. He lit his own cigarette first. The man leaned closer to me, biting his cigarette, and the slightly lit cigarette but gently touched the one in my mouth. His eyelashes were quite long, and he looked a bit gentle when he was doing something seriously. So, suddenly, I couldn't hold the cigarette in my mouth anymore. My cigarette dropped to the ground with a click, and he looked up at me. He sneered. Don't learn anymore. You can't even hold a cigarette properly. Would people be a little crazy on the night they become adults? I was thinking this as I was curled up on the sofa in Caesar's house. Why did I follow him to his house? There was the sound of running water in the bathroom. I stared at the closed door. Caesar's house was really big, with 3 floors and a garden, and there was no one else there. When I was in a daze, my phone in my pocket suddenly rang a few times. Unexpectedly, it was a message from Oliver. I bought you a lipstick. It cost more than 900 yuan. Happy, right? You should also dress yourself up better. There was a picture attached, which was a photo of the lipstick he took. Thanks to my good memory, I opened my best friend Chloe's WeChat moments, scrolled to the content she posted a few days ago, and compared them. Sure enough, it was the same lipstick. Her caption was, "This color is so ugly." Then I scrolled to the WeChat moments she posted just today. It was a whole gift box of lipsticks of the same brand. The caption was, "Someone bought it to coax me." Hee hee. The situation was already obvious. Oliver, with his straight male aesthetic, gave my best friend a lipstick, but she disliked it. So he bought a whole set to coax her. To avoid waste, he also condescendingly gave me the lipstick that my best friend didn't want as a charity. He must think that more than 900 yuan is a huge price for me. He must think that I'll be extremely grateful. There was a rustling sound behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know that Caesar was behind me, because the heat from his just finished bath was burning on me. I pressed the screen of my phone to turn it off. I saw that he wasn't wearing anything on his upper body. He reached out and slowly straightened my collar. There's something, Valerie. He usually only called me by my nickname when he was trying to coax me. I hummed in response. But at this moment, my phone rang suddenly. The name Oliver was displayed on the screen. I was a bit surprised. The man behind me saw the name, and his eyes darkened. Answer it. Valerie, this lipstick is the birthday gift I gave you. I know you're happy. After all, your boyfriend is really generous. The person on the other end of the phone was talking drunkenly. You should listen to me from now on, you know? Only I'm willing to buy these gifts for you. Huh, Valerie, I remember you're an adult now. So can we also? His muddled words were gradually going in a not-so-good direction. I didn't really care, but the fingers of the man behind me suddenly started moving restlessly. Have you had a bit too much to drink, Oliver? I was dealing with the person on the other end of the phone while holding Caesar's restless hand. I glared at him. He was the one who asked me to answer the phone, and now he was the one causing trouble. Hey, Valerie, was there any sound on your end? Surprisingly, Oliver could still. Just as I was about to brush it off, the man behind me suddenly and unexpectedly bit my shoulder gently. Hey, Valerie, was there any sound on your end? Surprisingly, Oliver could still hear it even though he was drunk. Caesar's wet black hair brushed against my neck, and he didn't seem to have any intention of stopping his prank. No, I did hear something. The drunk person on the other end of the microphone suddenly became alert. I mouthed to Caesar to stop making trouble. So he curled his lips and nodded slowly. No, probably the neighbors next door are quarreling. I tightened my grip on the microphone and made up a random excuse. Okay, then I want to hear you say you love me. This guy's mind was like crazy when he was drunk. I could never say such disgusting words. Okay, stop. I just want to hear you say you love me, Valerie. I didn't even finish my sentence. The man who had been leaning against my shoulder chuckled at this moment. It was clearly heard through the microphone. The person on the other end of the microphone paused, and I paused too. Moreover, the person beside me still thought the situation wasn't chaotic enough. He gathered my hair. Baby, are we sleeping in the same bed tonight? Oliver completely lost it. But I didn't expect that his reaction could be this big. After the phone call bombing, he also bombarded me with text messages. Who on earth was the man beside you that day? When we got to school, he asked me directly. I told you it was the sound from the TV. I was looking for test papers in my school bag, lowering my head, but I clearly heard. You were drunk that day, Oliver. I looked up and glared at him. It seemed to be the first time I got angry with him, and he was stunned for a moment. Chloe walked over from the side. Oh my, Valerie is so well behaved. How could she do such a thing? She only has eyes for studying, right? Besides, our Valerie doesn't really dress up much. No boys will come to her. Maybe Chloe's words had a soothing effect. Oliver calmed down. But in the next few days, my days weren't easy. Oliver was watching me too closely. I didn't expect that he could have such a strong possessive desire. He used to be indifferent to me before. I didn't break up with him because I did want to get revenge on him. But now, I really wanted to break up. It was so annoying. I really don't think he liked me that much. It was just his pitiful male vanity at work. And my good friend Chloe, although she still had a smile on her face these days, it was obvious that she was always absent-minded. Probably, she was being ignored by Oliver. Among the classmates around me, except for being good at studies, almost all of them come from wealthy or noble families. I was too lazy to answer him. Valerie, I'm telling you, if you're with me, I won't let you suffer. I know your family conditions aren't good. From now on, if you need anything, just tell me, and I'll give you. And, I know Caesar. Hearing the name Caesar from Oliver's mouth, I was still in a daze for a moment. Our school has first-class facilities and resources in the province. Among the classmates around me, except for being good at studies, almost all of them come from wealthy or noble families. So in such a school, a student's social connections and status have a lot to do with their family background. Caesar should have just transferred to our school. I remember the class he is in is quite special. Moreover, students in their class always look down on those of us in the ordinary classes. Oliver actually said he knew Caesar. It seemed that I was lost in thought for too long. Thinking that I didn't believe him, he grabbed my hand and walked towards the playground. There weren't many classes having physical education classes at this time, and it was basically free activity time. From a distance, I saw 2 or 3 people standing under the trees. My father's company has a cooperation with Caesar's family's company. That's how I can get close to him, Oliver whispered in my ear. When Oliver was grabbing my wrist, I felt Caesar's gaze had been fixed on the place where our hands were overlapping. I subconsciously struggled a bit. Hey, Caesar. This is my girlfriend, Valerie. Oliver put his arm around my shoulder. Caesar was looking at us without saying a word. To be honest, this feeling was really strange. Except for Caesar's close friends who were a bit of a bad lot, it was the first time for me to look directly into his eyes in front of others. How should I put it? He looked lazy, with his eyes drooping, as if he didn't take anyone seriously. It was completely different from when he teased me in private every time. Caesar responded very coldly. Mainly, with his cold face, it was almost as if "I'm in a bad mood" was written all over it. Oliver, who had always been showing off in the class on weekdays, actually had to behave meekly for once. He left with a forced smile, still holding my hand. Not long after walking away, my phone in my pocket vibrated once. It was a text message from Caesar, just a few simple words. "Come to the equipment room after class." I was being pulled by Oliver, and I turned around to look at him. The man with pitch black eyes also had his gaze tightly fixed on me. "What's wrong, you?" The sports equipment room was definitely a place where few people would come. My wrist was grabbed by someone. "Are you addicted to staying with Oliver?" The man in front of me was looking down at me. This time, I could feel that he was a bit angry. "I just want to find a chance to get revenge on him." I looked at the floor. There was only a thin layer of dust on it, with only the marks left by the basketball hoop. Suddenly, there was a noise beside me. Caesar propped himself up with one hand on the basketball hoop behind me, pinning me there. He must be in a really bad mood today. "When are you going to break up with that idiot?" In such a close distance, I was just looking at him quietly like this. After a long while, I asked him gently, "Caesar, in what capacity are you asking me this question?" He was silent, and so was I. I don't know since when I have become a bit greedy. I have become so eager to pursue results, so eager to sort out the tangled threads. I know Caesar. He isn't the type who takes relationships very seriously. I also know that even with my father's status, if we really talk about being well matched in terms of family background, I'm still not good enough for him. But at a certain moment, I just wanted to figure out his true feelings beneath his frivolous appearance. Whether he really likes me or is just playing with me. I wanted to figure it out, so I asked. But he just raised his hand and gently brushed off the speck of dust on my temple. "Yes, I don't have any capacity." He just smiled at me cruelly. "Then I wish you and Oliver a happy marriage for 100 years. Caesar and I could be considered to have fallen out a bit. Or rather, it was him who unilaterally ignored me. I sent him a few text messages, but he didn't reply to any of them. It seemed that only at this time did I realize again that the distance between him and me had always been far. Oliver asked me to meet him in a secluded corner of the school. I happened to have something to say to him too, so I went. Maybe subconsciously, I had never really taken Oliver seriously. Or maybe, I wasn't afraid of him in the first place. So I didn't expect that when he saw me, he would try to hit me. In an instant, he still missed and his fist hit the wall hard. "Valerie, you actually cheated on me." He sneered and threw a stack of photos at me. I took a quick glance. The pictures were quite blurry, but I could roughly make out that it was me kissing a man. I suddenly remembered that day in the equipment room when Caesar raised his hand to brush off the dust from my hair. It was actually taken like this by someone taking advantage of the angle. Actually, by now, it seemed that things like falling out completely couldn't be avoided. But what I suddenly found funny was that when Oliver was kissing my best friend passionately, did he ever think that I would cheat on him? He could actually get this angry. "Valerie, I tell you, I don't even need to lift a finger to bring you down. You're just a so-called pure girl who's a bit better at studying. How dare you step on my head? I can make both of your parents lose their jobs tomorrow." Do you believe it? To be honest, I didn't really believe it. Moreover, I thought he was being a bit of a hypocrite by getting this angry. I clenched my jaw and was too lazy to argue with him, but suddenly my wrist was grabbed by him. He suddenly went crazy and started pulling my clothes, then took his phone to take pictures of me. "I'll let the whole school see your true face tomorrow." When I couldn't struggle free from him, I realized that I had been too defenseless. He was a man after all, and it was too easy for him to trap me. So I started to call for help, hoping to attract people passing by. But even when my throat was hoarse from shouting, no one came. Just when I was about to bite his arm, he stopped on his own. "Caesar." It seemed that every time I was in a mess, Caesar would happen to see me. I suddenly remembered what he said to me that day. "Then I wish you and Oliver a happy marriage for 100 years." At that moment, Many scenes flashed through my mind. When Caesar was a child living in my house, he secretly took me to see the vast and boundless sea. Later, when we met again after growing up, in the midst of noise and merriment, he squinted his eyes and smiled at me. But just for a moment. Oliver was probably really fainting with anger. Caesar was looking at him with a solemn face, but he didn't notice anything unusual. He actually started tearing my clothes again right in front of Caesar. Then, I was also scared silly. Before I could even react to how Caesar got in front of us, he had already grabbed Oliver's hair and banged his head against the wall. The scene at this moment was quite exciting. Oliver's head didn't look good. At this moment, he was already lying on the ground limply. Caesar was squatting, looking at him. That was a side of Caesar that I had never seen before. He reached out and touched Oliver's hair. With this action like petting a dog, Oliver didn't even dare to fart. Don't let me see you bullying her again next time, you know? Hurry up and transfer to another school. Caesar stood up. Oliver on the ground actually started crying incoherently. This made Caesar kick him a few more times. Then he turned his head to ask me, "Is this the kind of person you like?" There was still some anger in his words, and his eyes were a bit red. I hadn't recovered yet and took 2 steps back. Then I clearly saw his eyes showing a moment of panic. I stared at him, but he had already lowered his eyes. He took my hand and walked away. Would Oliver just let it go? Of course not. Oliver's mother made a scene in the school first. I missed 2 classes in the morning and was called to the office. From a distance, I heard Oliver's mother crying and complaining, "Oh my, that girl, is she a student? She's just a vixen. What's the use of being good at studies? She has no morals. Can your school pay more attention to educating students' characters? If this vixen is let out, won't she harm others?" When I entered the office, I saw Caesar leaning against the wall, the woman throwing a tantrum, and Oliver with a gauze wrapped around his head. Caesar, who had hit someone, was just standing there doing nothing. The woman didn't go after him first. She really showed her true face of bullying the weak and fearing the strong to the fullest. "It's you, isn't it? It's you. My son was hurt because of you. I'll tear your face off." Saying that, the woman was about to attack, stretching out her fingers with expensive manicures and pointing straight at my face. Caesar blocked her. "You." The woman was just about to lose her temper, but she swallowed her anger back. The teacher next to her was flipping through the class roster. "Is it Valerie? Call your father over first. Is your father at work now?" The teacher adjusted his glasses and asked me. Oliver's mother let out a scornful laugh. "Since when can the daughter of a working-class person attend our school?" The sarcasm from those in higher positions towards those in lower positions here is really disgusting to hear. When collecting family information, my father, for the sake of convenience, told me to just write freelancer. However, I remember that this old man is currently. I called my father, and it took him over 10 seconds to answer the phone. "Dad, dare you free now?" "No time." I finally gave myself a break and am fishing with Lao Wang. I was silent for a couple of seconds before continuing. "Something happened at school. You need to come here." "What could possibly happen at your school?" "Deal with your own problems." His completely laid-back attitude really makes him a great father. At this moment, the phone in my hand was snatched away by Oliver's mother. The woman got straight to the point. "Hey, your daughter is seducing my son." My father was silent for a second or two. "Say that again?" "I said, your daughter, that little vixen, is seducing my son." The woman was clearly angered by his perfunctory tone. "Oh, it's not me seducing your son. If my daughter is seducing him, then go after my daughter." As soon as these words came out, not only was I silent, but the woman was too. The whole office fell silent. "No, How do you educate your child?" The woman was almost choked with anger. My father continued to spout his fallacies on the other end of the phone. "Moreover, if my daughter seduces your son, it means my daughter has the ability. If your son is seduced, it only shows that your son is a wimp." Seeing the woman getting furious, the phone was finally taken away by the homeroom teacher. "Please come to the school to handle this matter." If we can't reach an agreement on this matter, we will suspend and punish your daughter. I was really afraid that my father's next sentence would be, suspend if you want. It's not my schooling that's being suspended. However, he finally restrained himself and promised to come over soon. I feel that when we were kids, all those middle schoolers with a bit of a delusional streak once had a dream. That is, one day when you're having a normal class in the classroom, the roar of a helicopter echoes throughout the entire teaching building. Those classmates who usually ostracize you and the teachers who look down on you. At this moment, they all look at you with shock in their eyes as men in black file in and bow to you respectfully, saying, "Young master, come back. The organization needs you." Actually, when I was bullied as a kid, I also thought that my father could stand up for me like this. But he always told me to handle my own affairs because he couldn't be with me for a lifetime. As time went by, I forgot about my father's identity and also that he was quite wealthy. So, when my father called to ask me where the school's helipad was, I was instantly annoyed. Didn't he tell me to keep a low profile? What did he mean by coming in a whole helicopter? The roar in the background was deafening. I heard him shouting at me at the top of his lungs, "I'm in Yongzhou. Your homeroom teacher asked me to be here immediately. Don't I have to fly here?" So, when my father got off the helicopter wearing a floral shirt, a straw hat, and sunglasses, everyone fell into a new round of silence. It was really funny. When Oliver's mother saw my father's face, her arrogance disappeared in an instant. Oliver also turned his head, looking at me with shock on his face. "Why are you here?" The woman smiled sheepishly, as if even now, she still couldn't believe that the man who came by helicopter was my father. Caesar, who had been watching the drama for most of the day, let out a scornful laugh at this moment. "Auntie, I told you, it was I who hit your son. If you really have a problem, come at me. Moreover, your son was the one who first tried to take off her clothes to take pictures." Hearing this, my father got excited. "Your son was the one who harassed my daughter first, right?" He rolled up his sleeves, looking like a parent coming to argue when two kids in kindergarten have a conflict. Later, I heard that in that office, my father directly took over two of their businesses before he let it go. And that day, I went back with Caesar. To be precise, he came over and took my hand and walked with me. I remembered that it was the same when we were kids. He always liked to fight. He would come back all bruised and then take my hand and walk home with me. He was much taller than me, and his steps were big. I could hardly keep up, and he only slowed down when I called him. He turned around and tucked my stray hair behind my ear. I dodged a bit. "Not happy today?" I heard him ask softly. With all these things happening, it would be strange if one could be happy. "Caesar, I just feel." I called his name, and after a long while, I finally found the words I wanted to say next. What should I have done if I didn't have my father? If my parents were really an ordinary family, would what awaited me really be a disastrous end? Actually, I was with Oliver because he was nice to me back then when I had no background at all. When he was chasing me back then, he didn't care about my identity at all. I thought he liked me for who I was. Actually, I was just overthinking it, right? I looked up at him with a bitter smile, only to see the person in front of me looking deeply at me. The bright red sunset glow on the distant horizon was reflected in his pupils, burning with an endless deep light. "So concerned about Oliver?" As a result, he raised his eyebrows and asked me, a bit annoyed, "Did this guy completely miss the point of what I was saying? I don't think that without your father, you'd be nothing. Because you would definitely fight back. This is what your father has taught you over the past decade or so. Not relying on him, but on yourself. And, there's me. Your big brother isn't just for show, huh?" He said he wasn't for show, but he had been watching the drama all morning. Oliver dropped out of school. My identity also got spread out from the mouth of some classmate who came to the office. So, it seemed that in just an instant, the classmates who had been cold and distant towards me before all put on smiling faces. There was not much time left in senior year. Caesar was going abroad, and so was I. Both in Europe, but in different regions. On the day of the graduation party, the school made it quite formal. Suits and gowns were required. Halfway through the party, I sneaked out. Actually, I didn't plan to run away. It was just that suddenly more men invited me to dance, and someone got jealous. So he took my hand and slipped out through the back door. I held up my dress and told him that I couldn't run fast in high heels. There were twinkling lights in Caesar's eyes. He raised his eyebrows and told me it was okay, then simply picked me up. I was carried into a car by him, a supercar with blue spray paint. I had seen it in a magazine once. There were only 10 of them in the world. The night wind in the mountains whistled in my ears, and the roar of the engine was continuous. The stars at night were scattered in the vast darkness, and the continuous trees formed fleeting shadows. He drove me all the way to the top of the mountain. I stared at the person beside me. The wind blew his bangs on his forehead. When we reached the top of the mountain, the car stopped. The distant twilight was endless. Looking down the mountain, the faint lights of the whole city connected together looked like sparks. The person beside me spoke softly. That day, when you asked me if I was speaking to you based on my identity, I almost blurted it out. He smiled at me a bit helplessly. Later, I thought about it. I really didn't have the right. When I came back to find you, I found that you had a boyfriend, and it was someone like Oliver. I was quite angry, but there was nothing I could do about it. So, I got involved in this relationship. As a result, it got more and more chaotic, and I also became more and more unable to control myself. Actually, there are a lot of things I can't tell you, but I want to stop hiding them from you. I want to make things clear because this seems to be my last chance. How many brilliant starry skies had flowed into the eyes of the person in front of me. He had never looked at me so seriously. I like you. I fell in love with you when I was very young. I came back to this country to find you, but he suddenly stopped because I hugged him tightly. Stop talking. I got it, Caesar. I heard him chuckle softly. What do you get? That you like me. Knowing this is enough. I blinked at him. But he, slowly, said through gritted teeth, do you know that when you were in 5th grade, you promised me that you would marry me when you grew up? Huh? And then you quickly found someone else to be your boyfriend, right? I suddenly felt something was wrong. The arms around me tightened a bit. Wait, Caesar, who would remember that? Before I could finish my words, he silenced me with a kiss. He then gave a gentle bite on my collarbone. Who would remember? I remember it very clearly. Since that's the case, you'd better think about how you're going to make it up to me tonight. Suddenly, fireworks were set off down the mountain. Probably it was the last event of the graduation ceremony at school. The fireworks exploded in the pitch-dark night, and the brilliant flames lit up the darkness for a moment. There was a noisy and jubilant night. Finally, I found my answer. Even though the answer was a bit crazy and had given me a hard time. I raised my hand and ruffled his hair. Caesar. I won't forget about the things in the future. Thank you for coming back to find me.